Welcome to GNCC Espresso Live. My name is Mishka Balsom and I'm the CEO of the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce. Governments, businesses and individuals have been shaken to the core by the COVID-19 pandemic. Right now, everyone's number one priority needs to be the slowdown of the virus, and that means to strictly follow the public health protective measures. Niagara businesses are not only 100% committed to the guidelines, but hundreds of them have also adapted their regular production to meet the needs of the health system. We are deeply thankful for all that is being done. The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in the immediate change on how organizations are conducting business. Today's webinar is committed to providing answers and information on the resources and subsidies available to you, and for that we are joined by Mike Veldhuizen, partner with MNP, and Steve Otten, Regional Vice President of Business Banking with Meridian Credit Union. Mike and Steve, thank you for joining us. I'm going to take a moment to just talk about Zoom technology, a technology that probably many of us have become quite familiar with over the last couple of weeks. All participants right now, and thank you for joining us, are on mute. If you have a question, you will see on the right-hand side of your screen a symbol that looks like a hand. By clicking that, we know that you want to ask a question and we will unmute you. Please just watch for it. The second option is that there is a chat box, a field where you can type in any questions that you might have. We can see those questions and we'll do our best to get to them. And thank you all for joining us. So let's get started. Canadian businesses are currently facing unprecedented challenges. To support entrepreneurs, there are a number of support programs. And Steve, I'm going to start out with you. Could we discuss in general how a business can effectively assess which programs are best for their needs? Steve, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mishka. Thank you also to the GNCC for arranging this webinar. So I would suggest back in March 14th, 15th, that weekend is when things really started to come to a head in Canada and also the US as it relates to a lot of concerns with businesses and what it might look like the next couple of weeks. So what happened the following Monday was all the financial institutions were flooded with phone calls and emails from our respective clients and members asking for what kind of relief programs were available. And by and large, the financial institutions stepped up pretty quickly with payment relief programs, the primary one being sort of a deferral or a suspension of principal payments for up to 3 months. And shortly thereafter, the federal government launched a massive relief program on March 27th. So the financial institutions, Meridian being one of them, are working with all of the various levels of government, obviously starting sort of the top of the house with the federal government, and working through the various programs. I'll speak to three at a general level. I think the one that will garner likely the most attention will be the third one, often referred to as the working capital program. So let me speak first to there's two programs and they go by an acronym of BCAP, B-C-A-P, and that means Business Credit Availability Program. And they are being run sort of side by side by two crown corporations, one being EDC and the other one being BDC. And there's various levels of eligibility under this program. And the biggest distinction, I suppose, is it becomes effectively a loan that does attract interest, and then there's a bullet payment on the end for the EDC program. And whereas the BDC program, there are payments that commence sort of after the first year of interest only. The best way to access these two programs are simply to reach out to your advisor at your respective financial institution. By and large, these are being best served where you already have your operating accounts, and your financial advisor will be able to, your account manager will be able to sort of determine which one's more suited for your business. So the third program, which we refer to as CEBA, which is CEBA, or Canada Emergency Business Account. And again, this is the program that is clearly garnering the attention of many of our businesses. And what it basically is it provides qualifying businesses with access to a $40,000 term loan at 0% interest. So clearly this is a great option for especially our small business folks in the community. The interest does not actually start running until after sort of 2023. So you have a couple of years to deal with it. And there's also a loan forgiveness component of it as well, if the loan is not paid in full. If it's paid in full by December 31st of 2022. So you might ask, who is eligible to qualify for the program? In order to qualify for this one, there's some qualifying, who is eligible for it. And primarily it's based on your payroll expense that must be between $50,000 and $1 million for the year 2019. And by and large, again, this program is going to be run more or less electronically through your respective financial institution where you do your primary banking. That is a qualifier for this program. We're still working with the various levels of government, primarily the federal government, to just iron out all the details. And we might say, well, what's the holdup on this? Frankly, there's a lot of logistics behind it in terms of verifying, the borrower, and ensuring that the proper due diligence is still done on behalf of the government. So they will be, once the systems are all arranged with the various financial institutions, the loans will be processed very, very quickly. And what I would suggest is reach out certainly to your financial institutions for more questions as it relates to this program. But I would suspect over the next couple of days, you'll see a full rollout across the country.
That makes sense. Thank you very much, Steve. Mike, would you like to add to some of those programs?
Sure. Thanks, Mishka. As the government was rolling out some of their benefits, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As the government was rolling out their benefits, they realized there were a number of issues for businesses who were not able to keep people employed, such as restaurants and many businesses that had to close their doors due to this the pandemic. So the government came out with a number of programs that were targeted at businesses specifically and being able to keep employees on payroll. So the first one they came out with was called a temporary wage subsidy. This one was designed for employers who were individuals, partnerships, nonprofit organizations, charities, and also Canadian-controlled private companies. This was the first one that came out in March. And on this program, the government was going to provide a subsidy of 10% of the wages paid to the employee, and up to a max of $1,375 per employee. And this will last for 12 weeks. The cap per employer is $25,000. The nice thing about this program is there's no application required, and it started immediately. The other part to it is the way it was implemented and is implemented is the employers just reduce the income tax withholding on their payroll deductions. So from that standpoint, the employers will get an immediate cash flow reduction or cash flow outflow reduction on their source deduction payments. The one thing that we've looked at is it's only 10%. So from a cash flow standpoint, it's not a huge program that I would say when we looked at it for our clients, it wasn't a program that was large enough that I would expect anyone would bring an employee back if it didn't otherwise make business sense. But if you had employees that were working, and this definitely helps out a bit. The nice part is from an administrative standpoint, there is no application required. You just reduce your source deductions. And then I think at the end of the year, when you file your T4s, there'll be some government forms and documents ready at that point that will allow it to be properly reported. Subsequent to that, the big program that came out was called the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program. So this is the one that I think everyone's talking about, where the government's providing a subsidy up to 75% of wages for qualifying businesses for up to 3 months. This is retroactive to March 2020. The program applies from March 15th to June 6th, and eligible companies can receive up to $847 a week per employee. The nice thing about this program is there are no qualifications to be a Canadian-controlled private company. Any employer, large, small, public company, as long as they're operating a business in Canada, can qualify for this. So right now for this program, it's not operational. It's going to be applied through the CRA website, similar to some of the other government programs that the government has proposed. So they expect the CRA portal for this to be open in 3 to 6 weeks, with payments commencing right away once it's up and ready. There are some more administrative details that the government's working on around this, but one of the big qualifiers on this is the business that's operating, in order to qualify, has to have a 30% decline in revenue demonstrated year over year. So to qualify for March 2020, there has to be at least a 30% decline in revenue from the revenue that the business had in March 2019. And same for April, looking at the prior year, in May and June. So I did watch the press conference when the Minister of Finance was talking about this and announcing these details, and some questions were coming up of what if the business wasn't operating in the prior year, it sounded like they're still looking at some of those details and whether they would look at prior months rather than just the month in the previous year. So I think those are details that we'll be getting more information on. The other part to this is the subsidy is for 75% of the wages that the business pays, and the government has said that the employers must make best efforts to pay the remaining 25%. So what I take from this is it's not mandatory. So if you can't afford to pay the extra 25%, but you want to employ your employees at 75% of their normal wages, that's a possibility, and the government is definitely willing to make that commitment. And so that's part of this program. So we're not completely sure what it means right now that best efforts must be made. So I think if the company's not operating and there's no revenue coming in, I would think you'd be pretty clear that you don't have any ability to pay the remaining 25%. But if the business is operating and maybe it's making some money, but you're bringing other employees back on where they're not actually working, I don't know at what point you need to pay them out of your profit. So that's going to be some of the details that we'll be looking for as the full legislation on this program comes out. So.
Thank you very much, Mike, actually, for both Steve and Mike for actually going over some of the programs and subsidies that are actually available to business right now. I have to say, well, we have heard from the business community that especially when it comes to the 75% subsidy, the 3 to 6 week period of time seems to be a big window for a lot of businesses who have and are experiencing a very low cash flow. So it's something that I think a lot of businesses are looking at in detail, and the more and the quicker the federal government is moving forward on it, I think the more it is appreciated by the business community. One of the participants of today's webinar actually has a follow-up question, and this follow-up question relates to some of the information that Steve has shared with us, and it says and asks that this particular business has approached their own bank about programs, and they have no information to date. And again, they're asking, is there any information on timelines on when the financial institutions will be able to start applications? And Steve, I think if I can ask you to maybe take this particular question.
Sure. So clearly, it's wonderful what the government's been doing and announcing these relief programs. And frankly, that's the easy part, is the announcement, and the hard part is in the details in terms of how they get rolled out through respective sort of partner financial institutions. So we're hearing a lot of from different banks, different financial institutions in terms of timing. We are aiming for early next week to roll out the SEBA program. Again, it's not all finalized, and the reason is as simple as this. There's been a lot of work done in partnership with the financial institutions and the government to ensure that the actual rollout is smooth and easy. And it's just simply not as quite as simple to just have the announcement come out and then all of a sudden it roll through your respective financial institutions. So I would suggest SEBA will likely be the quickest one. It'll be early next week. We've heard as soon as a couple of days from some other financial institutions, And the other two programs, I would strongly encourage you to reach out directly to your relationship manager at your respective FI, because that would likely get you the best information. It may not all be posted on their websites.
Yeah. I think that's very helpful. We have also actively redirected people to get in touch with their financial institution, and as well on our GNCC website and in our daily update, we are trying to keep everyone as informed as possible about the progress on a lot of the subsidies. This one is a follow-up question. It's probably more related to Mike. Do you have, and this is one of our participants, and she's asking, do you have to guarantee the same number of hours that they were working prior to March 15th, or can you pay wages even if the business is closed and not working? And I think this is a very interesting question. It's something that we have been asked directly to, and we would appreciate your input on it.
Yep, great question, Mishka. And that's a question I think that a lot of people have asked. And I think when I looked at the rules that have been announced so far, there's no requirement for the employees to actually be working. The requirement is that they get paid. So from that standpoint, I think if the business is closed and it's not operating under the current environment because it's not allowed to be, there seems to be no prohibition to just paying your employees. And I think this is the part where you would pay them just the 75%, and that's where it would make sense. And you may not have the ability to pay the remaining 25. There's no prohibition to just paying them to the 75%. And them not actually having hours. I think the expectation is when the business gets open and back up and running, that you'll bring the employees back on. You'll be able to have a better continuation of your business operations by retaining the key employees, and be able to recover quicker. So I think that's the real goal with this plan, is to allow businesses to retain employees to be able to recover as fast as possible when we get out of the pandemic and people can start getting back to work.
Thank you very much, Mike. And while you have the mic, there's also questions that have come forward that actually look at the tax side of everything. They're looking at the tax deferral that the Canadian Revenue Agency has offered, as well as the Government of Ontario, that will allow interest and payment relief for some business on a lot of provincially administered taxes. And I was wondering if you can take a few minutes to just take a look at that part of it and give us a little bit of an in-depth take on it. Mike, over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mishka. So through this process, I know being an accountant, our questions were when the state of emergency was declared, and it was mid-March, and there were a lot of due dates that were coming up for tax filings in March, and in particular, April's a large one for personal taxes. And what the government did is they did extend the tax deadline. So for personal tax returns that were normally due in April, and April 30th, the deadline for those have been extended to June 1st. For self-employed individuals whose tax deadline was ordinarily June 15th, that stayed June 15th. So that deadline's not being extended. The other part that I think is just as important and potentially more important is any tax owing on tax returns, which would normally due April 30th, is now due September 1st for individuals. So that's for employed and self-employed individuals. Those tax due dates have been pushed to September 1st without any penalties or interest. Also on the corporate tax side, corporate tax returns that were due between March 15th and June 1st have been extended to June 1st. So that would be year ends in September, October, November. Those corporate year ends tax returns have been extended to June 1st. And similarly, corporate tax payable has been extended to September 1st. So any corporate tax final balances owing between March 15th and September 1st are due on September 1st. And also any corporate tax installment payments that are due in that period are also extended to September 1st. There are some other tax filings that have been extended as well. Trust tax returns have been extended where they're normally due March 30th, they've been extended to May 1st. Any charity tax returns that are due are now all extended to December 31st, 2020, so the end of the year. Partnership filings have been extended to May 1st, and some other tax filings have been extended to May 1st also. So that helps with people who are otherwise dealing with things that in their business that may be more important. They're getting their tax filings done, but it gives them some time. But when we look at it, I know the comment that that we're thinking about is when we get to the end of the summer and all these tax payments are going to become due on September 1st. We're hoping that people have planned for that and maintained their cash flow requirements to be able to make those payments, because ultimately the government will need to be paid. Some of the big things that haven't been adjusted is any payroll source deductions. Those need to be made on time. There's no deferral on any of those dates. The government did extend HST payments to June 1st. So there's a bit of an extension there, but also on that, the government will be, I would expect will be pursuing collection procedures pretty quickly on some of those amounts. So the one thing I do caution my clients is if you do have the ability to make your tax payments, it may not be a bad thing to do that, because I think the situation we're in now won't necessarily be, from a cash flow perspective, significantly better by September. Especially if you're getting your business up and going, you're trying to bring employees back, you're trying to purchase inventory and get the inputs you need for your business up and going. There's going to be a lot of cash flow demands by that time. So I would recommend just paying attention to when your tax payments are going to be due, and also just monitoring your business, because there are going to be a lot of cash flows coming.
I think, Mike, you're making an excellent point, is that especially when it comes to taxes, that those ones are going to come due just a few months down the road, and they're just being deferred at this particular time. We've had from some of our participants some follow-up questions, and I'm going to go to one that's been provided by Allison. And she said, some of my team only work 2 or 3 hours and would be best served financially to collect the CERB. Do I have to keep them all paid full wages through the wage subsidy, or can I pick and choose which staff stay on and which ones can apply for the benefits that are being offered? Some of them work as independent contractors outside my business. That's a very fine line there. I'm not sure, Steve or Mike, who wants to touch on this particular one, but Mike, do you want to try it, or
Sure.
Steve or Mike? Okay.
Yeah. The one thing with the Canadian emergency wage subsidy is that only does apply to employees. So if you have people who work on your team who are independent contractors, this program wouldn't be for you paying them, because they would be technically self-employed. And that's when I think that CURB program, that's what that's designed for. So that's a $2,000 payment a month, and it applies for 4 months. And that's where employees may want to look at what benefits are out there for them and what best suits their needs, and maybe give some recommendations to you as their employer to do that. The other part that we've talked about is we don't necessarily know if someone's only working 2 to 3 hours a week or part-time at a business. Do they have another job somewhere else where from the employee perspective, it's not as cut and dry from when the employer's looking at who they keep on and who they don't, because their ability to claim some of these other programs, the employer may not know all the details for that individual. So that's something that the individual should be looking at themselves and trying to best assess what's best for them.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. There is another follow-up question, and this one is indicating for the 75% subsidy, it may be 3 to 6 weeks before the CIA website is set up to process, but has to be stated when the legislation may be passed and the full details. Staff are frustrated, sitting at home wondering why the business is not reacting yet. And at this point, we truly need businesses to, and businesses have been asked to be patient because the federal government has indicated that there is a 3 to 6 week window. But Steve, do you want to touch on this particular one? I think other than time, I'm and waiting, I think at this point, I don't know if there's a lot of other options that employers have.
Yeah, really there is, and it is a waiting game, and it's not unlike the other programs as well that the government has been laying out. There's a lot of background that has to happen with these programs as they get rolled out. So whether it's sort of directly through the government websites, CRA or otherwise, or whether it's through partner organizations such as, let's say, BDC, EDC, financial institutions, it's really unfortunate, but it is a bit of a waiting game to ensure that when the programs do roll out, they're rolled out a lot more seamlessly.
Yeah, I fully agree actually with you. We're switching topics here a little bit. And this is a question that has come in, and I think that is probably from a customer's point of view. Other than those businesses deemed essential, many offices and places of business are currently closed to customers and employees working from home. But so many of your own businesses, MNP, Meridian Credit Union, some of your staff is working from home. How can a customer or a member be confident that their matter is still being dealt with a confidentiality in mind? And Mike and Steve, if I could ask both of you maybe to just touch base on this particular one. Maybe Steve, if I'll ask you to start out, how can a customer be confident that their financial matters are being dealt with confidentially, as many of us are, as we all three of us here right now are sitting in our home offices?
For sure. Can you hear me okay, Mishka?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to speak just very specifically to sort of our business banking group at Meridian. And the reason is we have a team of about 45 people, and we are all working from home. We have very robust security systems in place. We all use VPN, which is likely something very familiar to many people. None of us print from home, so you don't have to worry about any of your information being printed in our home offices. We do move all of our files electronically. And so again, we have very clear protocol about recording information at home of our members, and we use encrypted emails and secure email messaging through our online banking platforms. So again, just to rest assured that everything is exactly the way it's intended. In many ways, I can function from home the same way I could function from the office with exactly the same security protocols.
Wonderful. And Mike, looking at MNP, can you give us or this customer a little bit of insight and in how you're working?
Absolutely. So at MNP, our offices are pretty much empty these days. Everyone is working from home. The nice thing about MNP is our technology is such that I can work from home the same as I can work from my desk. So we have access to all our software, all our computer systems. Everything is centrally on our server. So nothing is actually at home with us, but we can work electronically. A lot of our work is done electronically anyway. So the one thing that I would say our biggest change is the ability to get information to and from clients is a bit impacted by this, but we do have a secure drop boxes at the offices that are emptied regularly, and that allows us to take information in, and also we do have a secure portal on our website for clients to submit their information to us directly. That goes to the respective team member that is working on it. The one challenge that we're finding is when we have our tax returns and things done, how do we get them signed? And there are a number of forms that do need to get signed. And the nice thing is the government, I think it's in March, along with these tax measures, they did finally announce that they're accepting electronic signatures on tax filing. So that has been a huge win for I would say the tax community and being able to get some of the tax filings up to date with technology. So we're now able to send tax forms out for electronic signature the same way that the real estate industry has been doing this for many years. So I think that's a big win, and I think when we look at our business and some of the changes that we're making to be able to go paperless and electronic, we're hoping that we can keep those and continue to build on those going forward. So the nice thing is our business can continue to go, and we do have everyone working at home. So we're able to meet our clients' needs and respond with emails and phone calls and those types of things. So it's for the most part, it's sort of business as usual for us.
Thank you very much to both of you on this one. And the electronic signature was actually a really big step forward and a much needed one. On another topic, one of the attendees is asking about cash flow. Cash flow these days has been considered to be king. When we look at small to medium-sized enterprises, they usually only work on a cash flow of about the average of 27 days. So the demand for products and services has ceased and customers are delaying many purchases. And with a cash flow of about 27 days, how can a business prevent a cash flow crisis in times like this? And Mike, how would you advise can a business prepare their cash flow forecast? Should they look at a month out, 3 months out, 8, 12 months? What do they need to take into consideration?
I think businesses will we want to look at definitely a month. At this point, I think you probably may even want to be looking 3 months out, given the state of uncertainty that's out there. And then when you're doing that, what we recommend is definitely the first step would be identifying your key customers and suppliers and who represent your critical accounts. And as you look at those cash flows, you want to make sure that you can meet the demands of your customers and suppliers, and it's going to be key to know exactly where your business sits. So there's going to be a number of probably difficult decisions made in the next short while that cash flow and information about your business are going to be important. I think even I have some clients that probably don't watch their cash flow as closely as they should. I think they're a bit more reactive, and as long as they have cash in the bank, they're happy and they think cash flow is good. But I think the key is going to be watching your accounts receivable. Anything that's getting old, you'll want to be trying to collect it as quick as possible. The other part to remember is you may be experiencing some cash flow issues in your business, but you'll want to be also paying attention to the fact that your customers are experiencing the same situation. So you'll want to make sure that you can collect your cash that's owed to you as quick as possible. And you'll want to be monitoring the payables that you have, and just being strategic on the ones that you're paying to be able to keep your business running. So it's definitely going to be key to have the information, do the cash flow as quick as you can, and keep an eye on it as we go through the next few weeks and months to see how the cash flow is coming compared to the forecast that you prepared.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I also wanted to just let all the attendees again remind them of that there are a number of programs that employees can tap into to positively impact the cash flow situation that they're finding themselves in. Steve, I'm not sure if you would like to add anything to it, or we'll move on to the next question.
Not much. I mean, it's essentially, working similar to what Mike was suggesting. We're recommending sort of a 13-week or a 3-month rolling cash flow as well, that they update every single week, and just make adjustments for your various inputs and outputs, like the receivables and payables Mike was speaking to. The most important thing that we have as sort of lenders is don't surprise us. Like if something's coming out that we need to know about, you're much better off to tell us sooner rather than later. And it almost kind of goes back to what Mike was suggesting earlier about paying your taxes. If you can make those payments, do so, because you don't want to be surprised in August when the payments come due and you're wondering how you're going to make those payments. So your best thing you can do is ensure that your suppliers know what's happening, your employees know what's happening, your lenders know what's happening, all your various partners know exactly what's happening, and just keep people apprised of any new developments.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Steve and Mike, I think this question is geared to both of you. This particular individual is indicating that businesses hear a lot about the need to orchestrate the recovery of their organization and supply chains now. the actions and steps that companies are taking during this transitionary time will be the foundation for them to thrive again. How can they best prepare for recovery and whatever is going to be the new normal? Again, I think businesses are asking how to best plan for it. So we just talked about the cash flow and how to plan for that one. And here's someone asking and saying, like, how can I set my business up best to actually succeed in the recovery period that they are going to be entering? And I'm not sure who wants to take it first. Maybe I'll ask you, Steve, to touch on this one.
Sure. So clearly, we're in unusual times, and what I'm actually fascinated by is how many of our local companies in Ontario, but also in Canada, are sort of retooling or revisiting their business in terms of how do they fit into the quote-unquote new supply chain. We certainly imported a lot of things from overseas. It doesn't mean that we weren't capable in our own country, but or even in province, or even in Niagara for that matter. But there's a lot of businesses doing a bit of a revisit to say, how can I be part of this supply chain in many different ways? We're seeing the government sort of call to action the various businesses as well to say, listen, we need you to step up right now and sort of fill the blanks where we see blanks right now. And that's not unlike all the local businesses that we deal with. They're clearly going to be sourcing other suppliers and for that matter other customers and other ways of doing business. And as much as it's clearly a very painful thing we're living through and we're dealing with for a lot of our businesses, it's also striking, and we're seeing the resilience of our business community in terms of how they're coming through and just doing things a lot differently than maybe they would have done even 2 months ago.
I couldn't say it any better. Mike, would you like to add to Steve's point?
Yeah, the one thing I would say definitely, and I think Steve touched on this, is business is going to be different afterwards. And I think the biggest key for a business owner is going to be able to adapt to that and as quickly as you can, and identify the opportunities for your business coming out of this recovery and how that needs to change. Or maybe you're lucky and it doesn't need to change a whole lot. Will be the key. So just identifying what your opportunities are going forward and taking advantage of those as quickly as you can.
This is an interesting question that comes forward, and Mike, it might likely be geared towards you. This particular business is experiencing significant reduction in the transaction volumes, and because of it, they are faced with very difficult choices, and they're indicating, and which I think is a great sign of self-awareness, that one in such difficult situation is often prone towards making very quick decisions. What are some of the things that employers need to be cautious of?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think part of this environment is business owners do need to make quick decisions. You unfortunately don't have the luxury of time in this type of environment that we're operating in. I think the things that businesses will want to be mindful of as they go forward and make decisions quickly is, I think number one is, what impact is this going to have on your business in the long term? Because short-term decisions definitely need to be made for the businesses to be able to survive. But paying attention to what the long-term implications are through the recovery in the next few years, and maybe it makes sense to retain key employees because they're just not replaceable. And if you lose them, that's a loss that the business won't be able to recover from long-term. And especially with suppliers and customers, and maybe it's time to look at unprofitable parts of the business, and maybe those go first. Especially you need to watch whatever legal requirements you have, making sure you don't make any quick decisions that get you in trouble legally down the road. So you definitely want to be managing your exposure and any potential liability that you'll have down the road. So yeah, just trying to think through and what the implications are. It's going to be different for every business. There's no sort of checklist to go through that is going to apply to everyone. So everyone needs to just sit back and think about their businesses. And unfortunately, it is the owner's decision to make those decisions, and a lot of those decisions rest on their shoulders. And but that's what has to be done in these situations.
And I'm coming back to a point that Steve has made a couple of minutes ago. Do include your financial institutions, do include your accountants and tax consultants in some of those key decisions that you're about to make. It often results in a much better decision that is being overall made for the organization. This is an interesting one, and this is coming from an organization that is really dependent on the international market. It's from companies that operate and have business relationships in China or other impacted countries, and or they produce and distribute to and supply foreign countries with their services and their products. They naturally have been immediately impacted due to so many restrictions that are in place. How can they protect their supply chain in such an uncertain environment that we're living in? And I'm not sure, Steve, if you want to take it first, or Mike, I'm open to either one of you, looking at those businesses that are really having and are dependent on international business relationships.
Yeah, clearly this is a tough one. I can't speak a lot to it. I think what I would suggest is maybe a good resource for such a company might be actually EDC. This is the business that they're in, and I would suggest maybe reaching out to them, or even reaching out to your financial institution, who we all have relationships directly with EDC, and that might be a really good place to start. But beyond that, I don't actually have a lot of good suggestions for that. Clearly, this is a real tough one with the global markets being what they are today.
Yeah. And Mike, you're same position?
Definitely, yeah. I think that it is difficult, and I think Stephen's right that the EDC is in that market and that's their business. So I would definitely reach out to them and just see what's available. It's definitely constantly evolving, especially as countries sort of come in and out of this pandemic at different times, and it's going to be tough to know when things sort of get back to normal, and whether your customer's lagging or if they're ahead of the bus in the curve, and just dealing with those issues. So.
Makes sense. Again, a lot of the questions we're seeing coming in have to do with the timeline. And Steve, this one is for you. Are financial institutions giving any consideration to the possibility that this crisis may last a long time, for example, 12 months, and that small business owners may face insolvency because they're required to stay closed, because they're considered non-essential, because they're earning zero income, and because they do not qualify for enough federal assistance, and so will not be able to make a mortgage payment and could lose their places of business or their principal residence. And Steve, this one is for you.
Yeah, sure. So we are definitely doing a long-term view here in many ways, but what we're trying to do is do it in buckets of sort of 3 months at a time. And that's as simple as the fact that the things around us are changing materially and quickly. So we're suggesting 3 months at a time, and it certainly doesn't mean that is the be and end all, that we're not going to support the business going forward. We certainly will, and it just might mean different things as the government programs start to roll out. But we are taking a longer term view. What we just don't know is the tenure in terms of how long this is going to last, of course. And we're certainly very well aware that there's going to be businesses that may have to be closed for a longer period than maybe originally anticipated. And it's hard. Like I said, we're doing week by week, and in fact, we're doing the same thing even just in terms of internally. When do we all get back to the office to work? And we're literally doing it sort of week by week, and then maybe months at a time. But certainly, a 12-month view feels very far out in this environment.
I fully agree, actually, with this. Mike, this question is for you. Do you anticipate the government will be making additional changes to corporate and personal taxes in the future?
Yeah, great question, Mishka. When I look at it from a personal tax standpoint, I would expect that the tax filing due dates for personal taxes should be what they've set out now, so June 1st, June 15th. The reason for that is there are a number of government credits that are income tested, such as GST credits and some others that payments are made in July. So if they extend these tax filing deadlines any further, people are not going to be able to properly apply for those credits, because those are done through the tax return. So I expect that the June 1st deadline is a hard deadline, and it won't change. the one nice thing too is anyone who has a tax refund, those refunds are being paid now. So file on time if you're getting a refund. Looking at the corporate side, it's tough to know if any changes will be made. At some point, I think the government is spending a lot of money and they're going to need tax revenue coming in. So they are delaying payments to September. It's really tough to know if anything's going to get delayed beyond that. I think what will happen is the tax filings will probably have to get done. I'd be surprised if those get pushed back any further. Maybe what the government will do is maybe they'll adjust on the payment side of when people can pay their taxes, but it's really difficult to know if anything is going to get changed further on the tax side. I think we'll have to see how the economy goes and see when the recovery can start. I would expect that if things drag out longer, the government will probably extend some of these programs. I think a lot of the wage subsidies and other programs are designed to last for 12 weeks. So if 12 weeks isn't long enough, I would expect that we may see some adjustments on that side, but it's just speculation on my side.
That sounds fair. We have Annette with us, and Annette, you have the mic if you want to ask your question. I think I believe I've unmuted it, but I'm for some reason not. I might ask someone. Annette, I don't think at this point that we can hear you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come right back to you. Actually, I think we can now. Annette, can you hear us? Annette, if you have a question, I think the mic is all yours. Actually, you know what? We got the questions in two forms, so I'm actually going to go over. She also actually sent it in to us. And so all major banks agreed yesterday to reduce the credit card interest by 50%. Do you know if that will be done automatically, or do you need to call your credit card companies? And I think, Steve, this, I would imagine, is geared towards you. Great question, Annette. Thank you very much for it. Steve, over to you.
I wish I had as good of an answer as the question was. So the short answer is I actually don't know. I would strongly imagine that it's going to be different for each company, simply because as much as the banks all have credit cards, there's lots of other credit card companies out there as well. So we're working through the details of that piece of it sort of on our side as well. But I'm hard pressed not to believe that anybody who wants lower interest will not be able to get it in that way. I mean, everybody wants to pay less interest. So short answer is I don't know for sure how it's going to be, but it's going to be company to company.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And we're coming close to one of the last questions. And Mike, this one is actually for you. And this particular participant is asking for practical tips when it comes to payables and receivables at this time. I think there's probably a few, and if you could share them with us, we would really appreciate it. Mike?
Sure, it's a great question, especially now as cash flow is becoming an issue for many businesses. The one thing that I would recommend is identify who your key vendors and customers are, and you'll want to stay on top of those critical accounts. The other part that I would look at is there's only a certain amount of cash flow to go out. So one thing that someone had told me fairly early on in my career when dealing with situations like this is watch what cash flow comes in during the week, and by Friday, look at the cash flow that's come in and use that to pay your bills on the following week. So don't spend the money that's coming in the current week, spend the money that's coming in the following week, and then prioritize your payables of what needs to get paid based on what's most important for the business, whether it's government remittances or strategic suppliers. Pay those the following week, and then repeat that cycle every week. So you always have a bit of a buffer of knowing what's coming in, and it gives you time to go and collect your accounts receivable as well. So I think that's the big thing is you want to be definitely looking at your accounts receivable and collecting those as much as you can, bearing in mind that, again, your customers are experiencing similar issues to you, and they may not be managing their payables in the same way that you do, but you want to be able to do this in a way that you can keep your business operating if it is operating, such that the cash flow isn't the part that cripples your business if you can otherwise operate. So I think that's definitely a key, and just try to maintain the same sort of cash balance, that working capital balance that you currently have as much as possible, and just monitor the payables and receivables.
Yeah, that's an excellent. It's so critical at this time in any business cycle that organizations are experiencing. We're coming to wrapping up our webinar for today, and I thought it might be good to pass the mic back to both you, Mike, and you, Steve, just for some closing comments, maybe advice that you want to leave the attendees with, or that you think might be extremely helpful. Steve, if I could ask you for your closing comments.
Sure. So I want to just touch on two things. One is there's been some dialogue about what a company look like when they come out of this, and what to kind of watch for. I would suggest one of the major things to watch for when you come out of this is everyone's going to be tempted to go from 0 to 100 very, very quickly. You get a business that's closed today and they want to ramp up immediately. So be cautious about growth. Clearly, growth is good and an important business, but not growth at all costs, especially when we come through this, which we certainly will come through this. So again, measured growth, and just be mindful of that the growth is reasonable, and that your company can handle that. And the other piece is, again, I've said it before, but I would strongly encourage everyone, be communicative. Talk to your partners, whether it's your accountants, your lawyers, your banks, and your suppliers, your customers, your employees. Make sure that you're engaging everybody. Now is more important than ever to properly communicate just where your business is at, where you think it's gonna go over the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, and you'll find that most people are willing to work together on this, because quite frankly, we're all in it together.
Excellent
point, Steve. Thank you very much. And Mike, your closing comments?
For businesses is just monitoring your cash flow and knowing what your numbers are. So I think that's a big thing, and you'll want to be definitely forecasting. So when you're talking with your banks and lawyers and accountants and suppliers and customers, you'll know where your business stands. So that's going to be definitely as important now as it ever has been, especially as the recovery starts. You'll need to know how are your forecasts coming in during the recovery period too, so you can make the critical decisions of when do you bring people back, when do you start ramping up your business. And similar to what Steve said, you want to be a little bit cautious on the growth, just to make sure that you're doing it in a way that's maintainable and you can be successful for the future. So the other part that I do caution people on is a number of these government measures are really designed for cash flow timing, and if it's loan programs and those types of things, that those amounts do need to get paid back for the most part. Some of them are forgivable in parts, but just remember that that's money that you're borrowing. So you want to make sure that you will have the ability to pay those back down the road, and not have to sacrifice any other personal assets or other things when the time comes for those amounts to be paid back. So just be a bit cautious on that, and remember that any amounts borrowed have to be paid back. And I do think information is going to be the key, just knowing your business and monitoring it, and keeping on top of all aspects of that.
Yeah, truly. Thank you very much, Mike. And on that note, on behalf of all of us at GNCC, my thanks go to you, Mike, with partner with MNP, and Steve, Regional Vice President with Business Banking with Meridian Credit Union, for joining us this morning at such an important webinar on such a critical topic to all businesses. Today's webinar will be available on our website at gncc.ca for anyone to access, as well as we're going to make sure that we're going to email it to all participants. who actually joined us this morning. There are going to be a further lineup of other webinars coming up, one on Thursday, and as always, twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 o'clock. So tune in to us, stay tuned for all of the information. And again, my personal thanks to Mike Veldhuizen, with MNP, and Steve Otten with the Meridian Credit Union. Amazing content that you shared with everyone today, content that is so critically needed. So thank you and have a good day. Stay safe.